literally see also with our own motor system. So, namely, when we see people performing actions, we activate the very same neuron that normally we activate when we are the agent of those actions that we witness as spectators. And from this original discovery done in the macaque monkey brain, we extended our investigation to the human brains. And what's more important, we discovered that the mirroring mechanism does not apply uniquely to actions, but also to emotions and sensation. So when we see a hand caressing the cheek of someone else, we not only activate the visual part of our brain, but we also activate the somatosensory part of our brain, namely the same part of our brain that normally activates when we are caressed and we do not witness the caress experienced by someone else. Similarly, brain regions that activate when we feel pain are active also when we witness the pain of others. So the idea is that all these different varieties of mirroring mechanism amounts to a peculiar way our perception of the world is built, what I define as embodied simulation. And thanks to this functional mechanism, in what we see, we can recognize something we resonate with, something we experientially grasp from within. So, together with David, we formulated the hypothesis that a crucial element of aesthetic response consists of the activation of embodied mechanism encompassing the simulation of action, emotion, and corporeal sensation. And these mechanisms, though social-culturally modulated, we take them to be universal. And this basic level of reaction to images is essential to understanding the effectiveness both of everyday images and the works of art. Of course, we can stand in front of the Spring of Botticelli, and then someone can come to us and say, oh, this is not really about spring. Like Claudia Villa has shown, it is a very complicated program of education in the Florence of Renaissance times. That doesn't detract from the original and genuine experience we entertain of that artwork when we are being completely ignorant of the history of that period. We are captured by what Botticelli was able to create. And we also venture to speculate that the felt effect of particular gestures involved in producing artworks may constitute a consistent component of our aesthetic experience and appreciation of artworks, and this is something that we are going to investigate. The experiment is going to start very soon. So embodied simulation, this is the hypothesis, generates the peculiar quality of the embodied seeing as, which characterizes art appreciation, and it therefore plays a role in aesthetic experience, being one of the main ingredients of our appreciation of art. This is mainly a working hypothesis, but we are going to hopefully substantiate this hypothesis with empirical research being done in collaboration. And I would like to finish with a really not contemporary quote, one of the founder of Physiognomy, Lichtenberg, who wrote, "Our body stands in between our soul and the external world, mirroring the effects of both." I think we are rediscovering this thing from a peculiar point of view of neuroscience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So I think we listen to David Friedberg and then we can discuss. It's better just to keep on going.
Just changing to where there's light, one needs light. Yeah. So, of course, this is in a way a great occasion, and I'm very happy to be here. I've been very impressed by the work of the Association for Neuroaesthetics and their sponsors who have encouraged this kind of debate. In a way, I think I should stop now, because those of you who don't know me, I will declare that ever since I began working years ago on phenomenological responses to works of art, in other words, responses that were predicated on the bodily involvement, and the emotions that ensue from bodily involvement with works of art. So when I heard about mirror neurons, I actually wrote a piece in the newspaper, and then one day I got a remarkable letter from Vittorio Gallese saying, I am one of the discoverers of mirror neurons and we should meet. So I didn't waste 1 minute, and we therefore met. And so I believe that despite the assaults that have been made on the use of mirror neurons, and of course these days it has been used in many areas, I believe that the discoveries about felt involvement in the actions of others, felt imitation of the actions of others, constitutes one of the most important discoveries that have been made in the field of the sciences that are relevant towards works of art. So, okay, and having said that, that's really just a tribute to the work of the Parma group and the significance of their work, I believe, for the understanding of art. Now, we come to the Biennale, to Venice, and we look at the various pavilions, the various works art on show, and there's one thing that we cannot do, and that is say why that object is art. Once the rules for art were clear, these days it's almost impossible it is impossible to say what art is. I also think, although this was not the point of my objection to Semeir's valuable work in both these areas, I also think if you were to go around to the various pavilions and start talking about, what is your notion of beauty, you would have 200,000 different notions of beauty. And of course, one of the problems that actually is incurred by even the discussions, valuable discussions by other neuroscientists about art, is that it's often assumed that beauty is a constituent of art. But those of us who have had anything to do with art in our lives know that the ugly is also a very important constituent of art. You can have a completely horrible thing and it can be a work of art. I'm going to skip my further tribute to the Association for Neuroaesthetics and my slight quibble with their wish to find a new language to describe works of art. I think rather than new language, we want to find out what is new conceptually, and that is what I will propose in a moment. I've mentioned the fact that it has always seemed to me, against the great traditions of Kant, Collingwood, to some extent but not entirely of Croce, that emotion and viscerality are important components of everything that we regard as art. Not necessarily as art, but whatever it is that we regard as art. Someone wrote an attack on the article that Vittoria and I wrote, saying that mirror neurons are not constitutive of art. We meant mirror neurons and the implications for embodiment are not constitutive of art, and we never made such a claim. We just simply said that embodiment and mirror neurons, or simulated embodiment, to use Vittoria's name, are important and critical elements in our notions of art. They are components of our responses, but they're not constitutive of art. For me, what also led me to the importance that Vittoria just emphasized of motor responses to works of art have been a number of notable revisions in the history of neuroscience which have attracted me for a long time. Although Vittoria and I have different views of the work of Milner and Goodale, these are names that you don't need to know, but I think one of the most interesting emphases that have emerged from the new cognitive neurosciences has been the emphasis on the fact that vision is not for perception alone. Vision is also vision evolved for action. And we know this now, that you can see a movement before you can identify the subject of what you see. This is in fact something that Semeir quite rightly pointed out in his introductory discussion. So it seems to me that we have really moved forward in terms of our perception of our knowledge of how we perceive things in works of art, and how we actually, and you would agree with this, and how extremely significant the perception of movement in a work is. You rightly also spoke about the capacity to distinguish temporally between vision for movement, vision for action, vision for movement, vision for identification, the fact that sometimes you see a color before you identify the emotion. I mean, these are important facts that I think we can bring to the discussion of works of art. One of the things that has interested me with regard to the problem of the great disparity of art now is, what can we really say about aesthetics? There is no question. I mean, Marino buys a work of art, and he buys a work of art because he likes it. And some of us don't like it, and some of us do like it. But there is an issue here. You know, how do we account for the general consensus? We could say, as I've often said, that art is simply a matter of acclaim. In other words, we generally agree now that this is a work of art. But this is an unsatisfactory, totally contextual proposal. What I would like to propose is that aesthetic response, this I have to emphasize, is not to decide what art is or what not art is, what art is not, is that the aesthetic response, what engages us when we look at a work, is not its beauty or its grace or these old Renaissance concepts. But what engages us is the way in which our prefrontal cortex modulates what I have calling bottom-up responses. In other words, responses that spring up from our limbic areas, responses that have to do with motor reactions. Now, obviously, the fact that we all cry in front of an image doesn't make it a work of art. We cry when we see for the first time the pictures from Abu Ghraib. No one, until they were put on exhibition, would think that the pictures from Abu Ghraib are works of art. When we see somebody doing this and we feel our hand going up like this, even if we don't do it, which is one of the indications, one of the phenomenological indications of mirror responses, this doesn't make it a work of art. What makes it a work of art is the cognitive assessment of these other kinds of responses. And I would think that one of the tasks that neuroscience could help us with in our wish to understand the aesthetic is to look at the kinds of connectivity that exist between, shall we say, motor cortex, premotor cortex, and prefrontal areas. In fact, Semir has done some quite good work with Kawabata on this domain. The same thing for emotions. You know, how do we assess these? What is the cognitive control of the emotions? You know a bit about this. We have to understand how we cognitively deal with the emotions that well up within us before works of art. Now, of course, could we have a look at Pei's pictures? I just wanted to say something, to take an example. I wish she were here, because then she could say you're talking rubbish, Friedberg, or not, but it will have to be hypothetical. While we're waiting for this, I think one of the interesting things about the history of art, I know it is the case, as Samuel said, that there are very few, can we have the first one, please? Very few art historians who are interested in this general project of bringing the sciences together with the arts. And yet, if we look at the history of art, we find that the language, in a way, is there already. People have always spoken about emotional responses, embodied involvement, but we now have new tools for assessing these kinds of historical concepts. Okay, so Vittoria, can you sit back a bit, please? So when I, so we can look at the work of art. So you see, this is a hypothetical reading in the terms that I have been suggesting of this. You go in there and you know, it's clearly, you can't say it's you might say it's beautiful, but what is it that first draws your attention? What first draws your attention, and this of course you can assess straight away with an eye tracker, what first draws your attention, I would propose, but at least it's susceptible to testing, is the kind of shimmering movement across the surface of those. Then you notice that big whooshing piece of wood below. And this provokes a motor response. We know, we could show the test that you have a kind of moving towards. In fact, it's interesting to notice how much language uses these concepts. Do you grasp it? Do you move towards that, or you move with it? This actually involves we know this, it involves the premotor cortex. It's activated when you see that rushing towards the thing. Then your eyes sort of skip about. You could do another test if you wanted, either with an eye tracker combined with fMRI, see the responses, but then your eyes notice these things dotted along the line. But then you have to deal with this process. So you are engaged, physically, bodily, and in terms, I would say, of motor responses. And then you start to think, you know, what is going on? Is that a starfish I see there? Why is that blue? Are these her things? I mean, she said these are my things. I thought that she just stuck it in a gallery, but she said it was her things. You see, these are all semantic accretions to very straightforward, well, not very straightforward. These are semantic accretions to precognitive responses. And so I think it's this kind of interaction that constitutes the aesthetic response. The ways in which we are trying to deal